Today I want to talk about something a bit sad that I've been noticing more and more in the gaming industry and in RTS games in general. Even though the rise of the internet and streaming made gaming mainstream and also more diverse and more exciting, at the same time, a lot of the cool things in games have disappeared and the modern generation will probably never get to experience them the way we did in our childhood. Only people who are older than 25 years old really know this feeling. You would come home, start up a video game, maybe that would be StarCraft, and just play against the AI. And back when the internet was slow and most games were basically single player only, even fighting bots felt special, and every match felt like an experiment. The point is, there was no such thing as meta. Everyone played in their own style, in their own way, switching things up from game to game. Any strategy felt new and unique, and that made the whole experience way more varied. You were free to try any combination you wanted, and those experiments were genuinely fun. You didn't need to even memorize build orders, and every match felt unpredictable because of that. But once esports and streaming took over, that part of gaming slowly faded. Now you launch any modern game, go into multiplayer, and suddenly you are fighting build orders that are copied exactly from the pro scene. You are getting hit with standard timings from Korean pro players, or you are getting punished by perfectly optimized mid-game pushes, or even cannon rushes and some bizarre strategies that were just stolen from other players. And even if it's a different genre, there is the same story. Everyone is using the exact same meta weapon. I used to play a lot of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and every lobby was filled with players using UMP-45 and pretty much nothing else, because that gun was simply the best, especially if we were playing Search and Destroy mode. Sure, you could say, who cares, just play how you like it. But the problem is, meta doesn't appear by accident, and meta literally stands for the most effective tactic available, and someone who follows the meta will always win more than someone who is just doing their own thing. And because winning is a huge part of the fun in multiplayer, every player eventually comes to the same conclusion. I guess I need to play the meta too, otherwise I'm gonna be losing way too much, and that's not good. Sometimes that's fine. A meta can be diverse and interesting, but sometimes it evolves into the most annoying brain-dead style possible, the kind that everyone hates. In RTS games, that can be an OP unit, and playing the same thing for months becomes exhausting. StarCraft 2 had plenty of those moments, and the most recent example is when Protoss were forced to play Void Race for over a year because everything else sucked, but at the same time, Zerg could only counter that with ultra late game playstyle or with hyper-aggressive all-ins, and that matchup was completely miserable for more than a year. The problem with meta is that games stop feeling like a fun journey or discovery. Instead, they become a grind, copying what better players already solved for you. You come home tired from work, university or school, and suddenly you're basically starting again, learning build orders, memorizing things, practicing optimizations, and for a huge part of the casual audience, that kills the fun. And if years ago this only affected higher level players, like if you were in Diamond, Master League or Grandmaster League, now metas start all the way down in Silver or Gold League in StarCraft 2, even for basically the beginners. Esports and streaming also played a big role in that, because many players dream of climbing high, starting a stream, maybe turning that into a career, and maybe that's why we all look back with such nostalgia at the early years of any esports. Because at the start there is no clear meta, or it changes constantly, changes all the time, because the game hasn't been figured out yet. Even pro players haven't settled on the correct way yet, and you can see this in StarCraft 2 and in plenty of other games. Early StarCraft 2 GSL and Premier tournaments were complete chaos, in the best way possible, of course. You never knew what you were about to watch. Every day felt fresh, and not like the Groundhog Day that we sometimes have now. Any match could turn into something wild and epic, and that's what made those tournaments so magical and so interesting to watch. You were watching the best players in the world, but every game became something insane and unique. For example, in the GSL finals we had Ultralisk versus Mac players, and also Master Zerg drop play, which is now unheard of, and all this kind of madness was constantly happening in early Wings of Liberty. Of course that couldn't last forever, and it never does. It's natural that at some point people figure out the game and there is gonna be one single meta that everybody likes to play, but the problem is nowadays the faster social media grows, the faster information spreads, and the faster the meta stabilizes. You could see this most clearly with the release of Stormgate. It was a new RTS game, it was fairly popular, at least it attracted a lot of players from StarCraft 2, so this is a really good case study. In StarCraft 2, it took months for the meta to settle, and players still kept discovering new playstyles and inventing new build orders. But in Stormgate, all of that happened literally within a couple of weeks. I played a ton of the beta, and it was funny to watch how in the very first tournament in beta, almost every player was doing the exact same thing 99% of the time. Maybe that's because Stormgate was a bad game, or maybe that's because YouTube was already full of guides and tutorials on the most efficient way to play, and maybe also because players were looking for that from the very first day, and this is actually how a lot of people perceive games now. I see that a lot on forums, and I see that in myself as well. When I launch a new game, and when I try playing that in multiplayer, I immediately go online and start looking for some advice, and this has become extremely widespread. It kind of feels to me that we no longer enjoy the games in the way they were meant to be enjoyed, we're just looking for a quick shortcut to make our progress faster in multiplayer. And in Stormgate's case, as a result, you would jump into a free-to-play multiplayer, and from the very first seconds, you were already up against people who knew the fastest path to victory and the best build order available. And I feel like RTS games suffer from this the most. Other genres give you more room to maneuver. In something like Call of Duty, sure, there's gonna be a meta weapon, like in most FPS games, but for your first dozens or even hundreds of hours, you might not even notice that. The player base is so massive, and there are also tons of beginners, and the biggest factor in winning is still your mechanical aim. If you shoot more accurately, you will win more, even with the worst gun in this game. But RTS titles don't work like that, at least most of them. On top of mechanics like APM and multitasking, you also have strategy, planning, and macro, all of which heavily influence the outcome. You might have more APM and make better decisions, but if your build order is bad, your timings are off, and your unit composition is shitty, it's probably not going to end well unless you are smurfing or unless you're an ex-pro player. This also of course ties into RTS balance. These days everything is tuned around pro players, StarCraft 2 is no exception, and even though I enjoy esports quite a lot, I kinda feel that sometimes it takes away from the single player content. On the one hand, of course, it makes sense because we all want to watch fair, high-skill competition, but on the other hand, it creates problems at lower levels and even removes fun playstyles or entire units from casual players. You can see this if you compare some other games, for example, Red Alert 2 multiplayer, where almost everything was insanely strong. And then there is the next game, that is Red Alert 3, where this is not true at all, and every unit, even though it was still fun to play with them, every unit was kinda toned down, was kinda boring. A lot of epic, over-the-top abilities just get removed for balance, and even if you take a look at StarCraft 2, take Protoss Mothership's Vortex. Yes, this ability was completely broken, but it created two of the most legendary highlights in StarCraft 2 history. These are the moments that we still rewatch today, and we really need those emotions both in games and in the esports alike. I think this could also be attributed to some top players as well, because there is no such thing in nowadays as finding your own style anymore. Maybe players are just got really good at everything at once, and I'm pretty sure that Cyril, for example, can play anything, but I remember back in the old days there were distinct playstyles for each player, everybody was known for something specific. For example, J-Donk was known for his extreme Mutalist control, some players were known for their cheesy playstyles, for their Cannon Rush, something like that, and others were known for their defensive playstyles and so on. Now I kind of feel like that is no longer true. And I think the saddest part is that the whole reason we play strategy games is to create our own strategies and tactics. When we think about brilliant military maneuvers, we imagine something unusual, unexpected, decisive and cool. If you play a World War II inspired game, you want to do something like the German Blitzkrieg or D-Day or Market Garden, but RTS games don't really allow for that anymore. Almost everything boils down to repetition and memorization. And of course there is still a certain charm to that. I enjoy playing StarCraft 2 and many other RTS games, but the genre has permanently lost something that once attracted thousands of young commanders who wanted to imagine themselves as their favorite generals. And the saddest part about that is that this is not even a problem that we can really solve, because with technology we move forward and there is just something that we have to acknowledge, and this is something that will never return. We'll never have those cozy days of gaming once again, and the modern world of gaming has changed permanently. That's all from me for today. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, check out our other content about some other test games in StarCraft 2. Have a good day. See you next time.